I'll call our meeting into order. The Utah League of Cities and Towns board meeting, May 19th, starting at 9:30, a little bit thereafter. We have a quorum present, and so we are in session. Number two on our agenda are some administrative items, the review and approval of the minutes, and a call for conflict of interest disclosure. Is there a motion on the minutes?
Like to make
I
a
move
motion to
to
pass.
accept the minute- oh,
I second it.
Our Mayor, or Mickey Wright and Tammy. Mickey Wright on the motion, Tammy on the second. Is that right? Everybody got that?
Yes.
All right. The motion is to approve the minutes of last month. All in favor, say aye.
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 All but I vote. Any opposed? All right. The minutes are approved. Item 3 is our board commission reports and appointments. It looks like Alexa.
All right. Good morning, everyone. Lovely to see your faces over Zoom today. I'm not
Alexa,
going to
one
be
thing-
asked.
One
Yeah.
thing, Cam, did we need to make a list of everyone who's here? Have you got it?
Andrew will give a thumbs up, so we are good.
Okay, go ahead, Alexa.
Perfect. Thanks, Mayor Walker. So I won't be asking for any action from you today, but I do have some updates on our new Commission on Housing Affordability representatives. Last board meeting, I presented to you that Councilmember Tom McDonald and Andrew Johnson were stepping down from their roles on the CHA, necessitating new appointments on the Commission on Housing Affordability. ULCT Executive Board of Directors and staff recommended 3 names to the governor last week, who is responsible for appointing municipal representatives to the CHA, and the governor appointed Council Member Don Shelton of South Jordan and Springville Mayor Matt Packard to the CHA. So those will be our new municipal representatives. Staff has a meeting today with Councilmember Shelton and Mayor Packard to discuss and coordinate existing efforts in the housing space that are taking place already in advance of the first CHA meeting of the interim, which is Tuesday, May 27th. So that's all I have.
All right, any questions for Alexa?
No questions, just a comment. I'm excited Mayor Packard was able to get on there. I think he'll be a good voice for us.
This is Don, and I know Don Shelton really well. He's really good. Don Shelton's been on the city council now for 12 years, and he's very good. I think he'll also do well. And I think considering the dynamics of who's on the CHA, he'll be a good addition for us.
And I want to speak on behalf of Mayor Packard. He is an amazing businessman. He's been in the bank system and literally been at the top of it. He has come forward with multiple ideas of how to solve this problem. So he is an excellent choice.
All right, any other comments?
Mayor Walker, when we get to the advocacy section, we'll give everyone an update on how the CHA fits into all the moving pieces here. But yeah, I'm thrilled by the response, and we'll pass that on to the 2 of them. We have a call with them later this afternoon.
All right. Next item number 4 is it's a board level personnel item. It's the ratification of the executive director contract that was approved by our board of directors. Cam, I guess everyone's had an opportunity to see the proposed contract. Are there any questions?
I had one question. As I was reading through it, I was looking for the length of the term. Because I assumed in my head it was a multi-year contract, 3 years or so. And last night when I was reading it, I could not find that. So wondering if it exists, if you could point that out or tell me where the term is.
I can go ahead and jump in there. This is amended from Cam's previous contract, and there was no full term on that. There is a section. There's no explicit term of dates on there. However, in section 5 is the term of employment and status of employment, and so it's basically in effect until it's terminated. And that section gives the ways in which to terminate.
Okay, so then we're to interpret it as kind of the statement for, so like the payment and reimbursements and things like that are in place until changed by a future board. So,
Correct.
It's never had a term in it.
It never had a specific term, Roger, is that what you said?
Right. When we redid it substantively a couple of years ago, we did not put a specific term in it.
Just the provisions for the termination of it. Both directions, I suppose. Okay.
it's fine with me. Now I feel good that I couldn't find it because it isn't there. So I'm feeling really validated in my late night reading of the packet. And it makes sense. I mean, I think obviously the executive director serves at the pleasure of the board, and so it'll just be on the board and the officers to then be mindful of those different rates and inflation and pressures and things like that on that we've specified as being strict dollar amounts, and then how those need to evolve over time.
All right, any further discussion on item 4?
Is there just out of curiosity, is there an annual employee review process that is attached to, you know, outcomes and incentives, pay? Because that would pick it up too.
Yes, we do every year, at least we have since I've been around, an annual review of Cameron. You know, we give him feedback as a board. So yes, to answer your question.
Awesome.
Yes.
I just tried to say that by the executive committee does the review.
Right.
I would just say, and if I can, then I'll speak to the issue. Obviously, this issue, the adjustment of the contract's pay increase for Cameron, he deserves it. In our opinion, he is exemplary in his performance. We're in as good a position as a league as we probably have ever been. He certainly, as we discussed it, certainly in the private sector market, we know this isn't it, but Cam's level of talent is substantial. We're very fortunate to have him, and we're very fortunate to have him working for us at what he is. He would command substantially more pay in the private sector. He could go over to Kate's office tomorrow and command more than we could probably ever pay him. But the beautiful thing about Cameron is he expects to be paid good because he's worth it, but he's also committed and loyal, and he has ate, drank, and slept this league for a long time. And so in my opinion, I think this bump up in his pay is every bit deserved, and I'm really glad we have Cameron. All right, is there anybody else? All right, seeing no further discussion, is there a motion to ratify the executive director's contract as approved by the board of directors?
I would like to make a motion to ratify the executive.
Second.
Cameron's contract is approved.
All right. We have a motion by Tammy and a second by Dan. Any further discussion on the motion?
Just that I echo what you've said, Troy. Cam can make so much money in the private sector. We all know that. The time and the effort that he puts in, the credibility that he offers, the job that he does is outstanding. So absolutely support it.
We should quit telling Cam he can make more money somewhere else.
He knows it, and that's what I love about it. He knows it, and he still wants to be here with us. So.
All right, and anyone else? Any other discussion on the motion? All right, seeing none, all in favor of the motion, say aye.
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 I'll vote aye as well. Are there any opposed? All right, that motion passes unanimously, unopposed. Takes us to item number 5, which is our tentative budget at the time of year. Nick, go ahead.
Perfect. Nick, do you mind if I start?
Go ahead, yes.
Perfect. Well, first of all, thank you for the kind words and for approving the updated contract. One point for all board members to know is that you as a board have to adjust my salary. I cannot adjust my salary. So for the contract, it has to come back to you. And having had a couple of meetings with the officers earlier this spring, I'm very appreciative, and my family's appreciative of the adjustment, the pay increase. And so thank you for your support, and thank you for that gesture. And the second thing I would just point out is that it really is a team effort. So while I appreciate the kind words. I couldn't do this without the fantastic team that we've assembled. And I'm very grateful for all of their dedication and their commitments. And this budget that you'll be considering here reflects the fact that we really do punch above our weight with the caliber of individuals that we have, and we want to retain them and support them and keep this team together as long as possible to advocate on your behalf. So with that background, again, I just want to say thank you on behalf of my family, and thank you on behalf of our staff for considering this tentative budget. Nick, I'm going to turn it to you to just give the overview of what we have to do today to set up the final budget approval in June. And then as part of this budget discussion, we want to discuss the next steps with the local administrative advisor. And so Molly and I will tag team that when we get to that point. So Nick, will you just walk through what has to happen today, and then we can start working through the memo.
Yes, indeed. By law, what has to happen today is the filing of this tentative budget with you, the board. That was us sending it out to you. And then this presentation we're about to briefly give. Then we also need the board to review, consider, and adopt the tentative budget. And then we will also need to, so there will be two motions here. Then we will also need to establish a time and place for the public hearing on the tentative budget. Now, we'll get to this at the very end, but given the times that we meet and the timeframes that are imposed on us, we are suggesting that both the hearing and the adoption of the tentative or of the final budget will happen at our June meeting, which will be at noon in Draper. So with that, I will get rolling. You should be able to see my screen here, and I will do my best to control that as I go through this budget. We're proposing a fiscal year 2026 budget of $5,235,000, of which $3,845,000 is ongoing general revenue, $850,000 is state-funded technical assistance, $270,000 is unrestricted reserve funding, and another $270,000 is the use of restricted reserves for the LAA program, which we will get to in that section. Overall, this is a decrease of 2% from last year's adopted budget. Hang on just a sec. Carson's coming in. It must be something important. Okay. Continuing on, general revenue, we are seeing an increase of $150,000. That is a 4.1% increase over the fiscal year 25 budget. As you're all aware, you voted in January of this year to reduce the rate applied to the property value component of our dues and maintain the rates of sales tax and population components. That would produce $2,705,700 with 100% membership. We are budgeting $2,690,000. We like to budget just below in case there's some communities that decide not to remain members. Overall, that's a 3.5% increase in the budget, or $90,000 in dues revenue, and that decision was made in January. The other portion of the general revenue budget that we're seeing increase revenue-wise is conference registration. Now, we have not in the past few years raised our conference registration rates, and we have no plans in this contemplated fiscal year to raise those rates. However, we've seen increased attendance, and looking at the numbers that we've actually had come in over the past couple of years, we've increased our budgeted numbers for that. In the grant and special project revenue section, we're seeing a decrease of about $69,000, and that is because the two programs that were a part of that, the Your Land, Your Plan grant from Intermountain and the ARPA assistance assessment will wrap up in the fiscal year that we're in, FY25. So those will be gone. That is a section where we include grants we receive from foundations or the private sector, or a special assessment like the ARPA one that we've done before. We have another section that we'll get into next, which is for state-funded technical assistance. Previously, we've treated that as a grant, but now since we have multiple state-funded grants possibly coming in. We're treating that as its own section. So moving on to that section, we'll move on into reserves. We have 540,000 total reserves we're contemplating and using in this year, 270 each in unrestricted reserves and restricted reserves that are set aside only for the LAA program. The reason we're budgeting this amount in reserves is because we have a policy in place that says we need to have our reserves be between 25% and 50% of the previous year's general revenue. And we are right at the end of last fiscal year, we were right up at the cap of 50%. So we want to use these reserves for one-time funding for time-limited investments that will knock us down. Our projections, and that's what this is based on, that would knock us down to 48%. And then I see we have a hand here from Councilmember Bradshaw that if you want to jump in here, be my guest.
Yes. So in the, I want to make sure I get the phrase right, the unrestricted reserves that we're spending down because we're at the cap, are all of those unrestricted reserves going into kind of these special projects, or any of those going into salaries and staff?
So Nick, I can take that question. Can you hear me? You should be able to hear me better. I was off the screen for a moment, and it was incredible to watch Cassidy and Carson come running in with my own new microphone here, because I'm using a backup computer because of tech challenges, and they fixed the audio in a matter of moments. So well done to them. So Kate, I'm glad you asked that question, because this came up as part of my performance evaluation with the officers last month. There is a portion of the unrestricted reserves that will be used for one-time bonuses for staff. And the our executive staff, so Nick, Molly, Justin, and I worked through a process for what that looks like based on how long people have been here and performance and other things. So there'll be a one-time bonus. We've never really done bonuses, so this is a one-time bonus there. And then the majority of this money will be spent on things that we'll talk about later in the expenses, ranging from policy research to doing a state night as part of the National League of Cities convention in Salt Lake in November.
Thank you. That is what I wanted to know.
And it does get a little technical there. Those bonuses will happen in this current fiscal year, but it's all one pot of reserves. So drilling it down in this fiscal year makes it a smaller amount that we need to use in the next fiscal year. So of the 270, technically, no, those will not be, that will not go towards ongoing funds like personnel. Our number would be much higher if we weren't doing that in the current fiscal year. So just to clarify there. We will also use we'll use 270 of restricted reserves to fund the LAA program. Now, those reserves comes from savings or unused funds rather in the first year that we did it, in which it took some time to get the program going. We had our program director, Gary Watcott, pass away in the middle of that, and we had a vacancy for a while. So there was a significant amount of funds from the first year that went unused. And then there is a limited amount of funds from the fiscal year that we're in that went unused as we had vacancies with Liam's departure. So ultimately, we have about $270,000 left in the LAA account. As you're aware, we are not receiving any funding from the state. We, as the league, are not receiving any funding from the state this fiscal year, though, and I'll let Cam and Molly get into it a little later. We're hopeful in the years to come, and then we have a plan for how to kind of slim down and run on a limited basis the LAA program through fiscal year 2026. Moving on to state-funded technical assistance, we're going to see a decrease of $730,000 or 46.2% less than last year. That is the LAA program, which was a $1.58 million grant, the majority of which was passed through to the AOGs. But we are also seeing two new grants that two different state agencies have proposed to us. One is a $50,000 grant from the Office of Data Privacy to help communities implement the data privacy report. And another is $800,000 from the Department of Workforce Services, which is the remaining funds from an appropriation that was made 2 years ago to help entities. And what we focused on 2 years ago was to help entities get their subdivision ordinance in place. The appropriation itself is broader than that, that can be applied to anything that is for LUDMA. And we have a plan that I'll get to in the later section on how we want to spend that money. Moving on to expenses, personnel expenses, we're seeing an increase in this budget of $153,000. That is 7.7% more than the fiscal year 25 budget. If you look into the details on the spreadsheet, you'll see that the larger increase is in benefits because with how we handled Liam's position and how McKenna and Alexa came on, we essentially have another cafeteria plan, which is our whole benefit package to include in there. And obviously, as Cam explained before, this is for merit and market-based increases, along with what we don't technically term a COLA, but it includes a contemplation of cost of living increases. Operations and engagement expenses, we have an increase of $30,900, which is 4.6% over last year. A portion of that is due to the increase in administrative costs, such as computer services and bank fees. But a good portion of that is also one-time investments using the reserve funding, which includes modernizing our publications like Powers and Duties and Making Sense of Dollars, one-time equipment purchases, additional professional development, and a special assessment that our condo association is planning on implementing that for building repairs. Event expenses, we are expecting an increase of $69,000 or a 7.2% increase over last year's budget. This is the year, every 2 years, we host our elected officials essentials training. So we are in FY26 will be one of those years. So that'll incur some additional costs. We also are planning on using some of the reserve funding to help host, kind of enhance the experience for Utah attendees for the National League of Cities City Summit that is going to be hosted in Salt Lake City this November. We're still working with NLC and Salt Lake City about what exactly that'll look like. You'll see a couple of options we have here in the budget are a state night reception for Utahns and one-day registration for Utahns with programming focused on smaller and rural cities.
And Nick, let me just add a couple quick points here. Mayor Shepherd's on the NLC Board of Directors, and I think Mayor Shepherd, feel free to chime in any moment here, but this will be the only time for the next few years where the fall NLC conference is this far west. The next 3 years are all contemplated back east. And so this is really kind of the once in an elected official's time to try to encourage our folks to attend the NLC event when it's in our backyard. I've also had meetings with my counterparts in the other Western states to call with them on this past Friday, as we're trying to build out some curriculum that's more focused on our types of communities and have Salt Lake be the glorified backyard for municipalities in Idaho and Wyoming and Nevada and other states that just can't make it back east to a normal city summit, but maybe could come if the programming was relevant because it's just a drive to Salt Lake. So we've been part of the NLC planning committee there. And then there will be a special discounted rate for Utahns to register for the NLC event. And then that state night piece, we think there's a really great opportunity 2 weeks after the municipal election to recognize those who are leaving office, embrace those who just won election or re-election, and tie it in somehow to the NLC event. So still working on those details, but this would be one of those one-time, time-limited expenses that we're using the reserves for that we think makes a lot of sense and has good return on investment.
Yeah, now if we could just find somebody that has a really, really good connection with Delta and could get some discounted rates for people to come in here, it would be great, you know.
All right, is there any other discussion on this? Questions for Cam?
So Mayor Walker, let me talk through item E. Nick, can you go down to the state funded technical assistance piece? Because we've had a bit of back and forth over the last few weeks around the technical assistance. And as Nick indicated, we are planning to proceed with the local administrative advisor program. When we met with you in March and April, we told you to, we gave you some information, so we're still working out what those details could look like. Now we're comfortable that we can run the program based on the reserves that Nick indicated. Those are separate from league reserves. So this is just the state funded restricted account. And we can continue that program for the next year and then seek to restore that funding. There is discussion in the governor's office about expanding the league's role in the other technical assistance programs that flow through the governor's office. The local administrative advisor is one of those programs, but there are these other programs that are listed on your screen. Molly, can I turn to you? You and I spent a lot of time last week working through this, and then met with the staff from the governor's office. Can you just take a moment to just give a quick update, recognizing that we've got a big meeting this coming Wednesday on this topic, but just give the board a quick overview of those other dollars that flow through the governor's office, and then we can come back to those one-time projects that Nick referenced earlier.
Happy to. So as some of you may remember, when we were setting up the local administrative advisor, we needed to be really precise with the type of technical assistance that we offered. And that was largely in part because there were other forms of state-funded technical assistance flowing to local governments. And we wanted to make sure that our program was discrete enough from those programs that the legislature didn't see it, and the governor's office didn't see it as a redundancy of funds and an inefficient use of funds. What we have found over time, and those other funds are two programs that are largely focused on planning and land use. And so we've been really sure to take a lot of care to ensure that LAA does not touch land use for the most part. In conversations of creating this program with GOPB, I think they've realized that some of those firewalls are beneficial from a budgeting perspective, are fairly inefficient on the ground. And we see as well that some of the AOGs on the ground are already blending together these funds. So for example, in one AOG, Nick might be funded by one grant, I might be funded by another, and Cam might be funded by another. In others, all three of us would be cross-funded with those programs, and we would be able to do all three. And so in conversations with the governor's office, I interpret what they're looking at as a bit more of a rebrand than a complete overhaul. So our understanding of what they'd like the league to do is largely to continue doing what we are doing with additional coordination with the folks who are running the other two programs, and then kind of removing that firewall on the ground so that the folks who are providing technical assistance can provide whatever technical assistance they needed, the community needs in that moment. So if it is, I'm typically doing administrative stuff, but a city has a land use question, I don't say, whoa, I can't answer that. If I can't answer it, I will. And it largely is just looking to make, I think, ultimately a more efficient and effective use of the funds. I think there will still be some AOGs that keep them as discrete programs. There might be more AOGs that continue to blend these forms of technical assistance together. One thing we do know for certain that GOPB is looking at is that while we're looking to have the LAA funds restored for ULCT, I don't think that ULCT will be a pass-through for the AOG grants anymore. Now that the state is looking to streamline these grants, instead of them having one contract with us and us having 7 contracts with the AOGs, and then them also having 7 contracts with each of the AOGs for these other programs, they are looking to kind of have one contract with each AOG for all of the technical assistance, as well as one contract with us to help supplement the technical assistance. And then really briefly, the league's role in this, I would say, is kind of, we've found 3 pieces where we are the most successful in this. One, the folks who are on the ground have varying levels of expertise. And so it is really having our consultancy pool of folks who have robust city administration experience, working to upskill everyone. Another is really administrative support, which McKenna has done an outstanding job in supporting since she's come on staff. Really making sure that we have that consistency, organizing training opportunities. The way that we've run this program is really what has inspired the state to move forward with this. And how they want to look at running their other programs as well, which is, again, a little whiplashy, but still exciting. And then third is kind of hands-on assistance with communities in crisis. And so that's kind of what we've been looking at. I've probably taken more time than I should have, so I'll wrap it up there. And if you have questions, I'm happy to answer them.
No, Molly, that was perfect. And Mayor Walker, recognizing that the last 2 times we met, we weren't sure where LAA was going to go at that point in time. Molly used the term whiplashy. It is a little whiplashy to now come back to you and say, in addition to being able to continue LAA, the state has also asked us to replicate that and help them on these other GOPB programs. And here's this one-time money that we didn't ask for, but we have been offered to help finish subdivisions, and to help finish mapping, and to help on data privacy. So we went from 2 months ago thinking we'd be potentially out of the LA space to now presenting you a budget that has a streamlined, or better put, a scaled back version of LAA for 1 year, one-time money for the subdivisions, one-time money for the data privacy, and then a discussion about partnering with the governor's office to replicate what we do with LAA to help them on those other programs. Okay, so that's a lot to bite off. Seth, I see your hands up.
Yeah, thanks. A question, I think, for Molly, in terms of these other programs that the governor's office is looking to potentially land here. And I think I might be thinking mostly of the land use technical assistance grant. Does this put the league in any sort of role where we are telling cities they're complying? Is this going to put us at odds with cities where we are going to be telling them you're doing it wrong and potentially creating conflicts for us with our members as some kind of an overseer?
Yes, that's a great question. And I would say the answer is no. And that goes back to, and again, we're still trying to fully understand this. And we have a meeting on Wednesday with all of the state technical assistance folks and the people on the ground to kind of clear some of this up a bit more. But that's why I kind of go back to what I mentioned at the beginning, that I actually interpret this more as a rebrand, and I interpret it as a rebrand on that ground level, where currently we've had like regional planners and we've had local administrative advisors and all of these kind of titles for the people who are providing the assistance. What they want to do is essentially rename them all community advisors, which is what R6 is currently doing, but they would still remain housed where they are housed, just with increased coordination. So what they really like that we've done is we've essentially created a cohort of our LAAs, and we provide 2 firm kind of training opportunities for them each month. One is a more theoretical training with Mark Christensen on like the theories of city administration. One is really looking at like hands-on practice and peer-to-peer learning. And so what I think they're looking to do is essentially create that model within GOPB and within DWS. And that's where those 2 programs will stay. But they essentially want to say it's more of like an open invite to those pieces. So if I'm really doing a lot of land use planning, I'm still going to report to like Tara Anderson at GOPB, but I'm going to be invited to attend the training that McKenna is putting on if I would like to. And so I think what they're seeing is they really like the way that we have created a cohort-based technical assistance model, and they would like to create complementary cohorts within the other two programs, and then just have increased coordination. They were talking like every other month or quarterly between ULCT, DWS, and GOPB to make sure that there's essentially a standard level of assistance and competency and coordination across all of these programs, across all of the AOGs. Does that answer your question?
I think so. I think it was a robust answer.
Okay.
You got a lot for that question, Seth.
Yeah, more than you wanted. Sorry.
Yeah, I think my always worry will be that we put ourselves, if we take on some programs, that we don't put ourselves at odds with ourselves, that we become.
Yeah, I don't think we will. So I think like really our role is still going to be, we are the administrative experts and we are supporting the administrative program. We are coordinating with the land use programs, but we are not mandating anything. We are not the judge or arbiter of anything that another community is doing. Mayor Wright.
Yes, so along those lines, is this going to put more demands on the LAA folks that I work with? It sounds like all of a sudden they may be having to wear other hats and do other things. And I feel like particularly in the case of our Brock Jackson, our LAA,
yeah,
he's already stretched pretty thin.
Totally. So great question. And I would say R6, I think, is already kind of embodying this transition. So Brock is already cross-funded with at least 4 funding sources. And so Brock kind of is an embodiment of what GOPB is envisioning as an option. And I think they just want to make it a little easier so that Brock doesn't have to say, all right, well, I worked with Mayor Wright on this general plan update, so I need to make sure I'm billing it to this program, but then I also helped him with a performance evaluation, and so I need to make sure I'm billing it to this specific, like, I think it's trying to give Brock a little bit more breathing room to say, like, I helped Mayor Wright for 10 hours, and that's what counts, instead of like, I helped him in these specific ways, and I need to be sure it falls into these precise buckets. So it should hopefully make Brock's life easier.
Okay. Then I'm all for it.
Molly, I'll add just 2 other quick things. Number one, when we built the local administrative advisor program a couple of years ago, one of the key tenets was that you had to be a league member to access that program. And so we spent a lot of time on Friday with the governor's team working through how that requirement could still exist in some form or fashion, even in this consolidated approach. And we think we found that approach, that we could still ensure that if Cameron Town is using the LAA component of this consolidated resource, that we'd still be reporting on whether or not they are league members and making sure they're league members, because we don't want communities to not be part of the league, but then benefit from a resource that the league is administering and has advocated for. The second piece, getting to Seth's question about not putting us at odds with ourselves, this is actually one of the reasons why historically the league has not been in the technical assistance space. Is one, there's not enough money to go around because everybody has technical assistance needs. And then 2, you don't want the league in that arbiter position. And so we're still trying to apply those same principles as we're having these discussions with the governor's office. We do on the subdivisions money and the privacy money, that those are one-time dollars that the state is looking to spend. And we felt like if it's not us helping to coordinate it, then who is it? And they're both narrowly focused, and in the case of the DWS one, builds off of 2 things that we've already started with subdivisions and mapping. But I do think a key focus with the state housing plan is going to be around technical assistance. And so that's why we wanted to make sure you were aware of all these moving parts and then what the role of the league can and should be going forward.
All right, anybody else on this item? All right, seeing none, it requires a motion to, we've reviewed now to approve and adopt the tentative budget and set a public hearing for the full budget. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Who's that? Well,
Mark.
Mark, all right,
Second.
all right.
Second.
We got a motion and a second.
Do we need to state the date and time for the hearing in the motion?
Yes, so I think we should do two separate motions, one adopting the budget, which I think this would cover, and then a second stating the date, time and place of the hearing for the adoption of the final, or the hearing on the FY26 budget.
Okay, so we'll convert that motion then to a motion to approve the tentative budget. Does that mark your motion stand in that regard?
That works.
Second, Dan, same?
Yep.
All right, any further discussion? All right, all those in favor of adopting the tentative budget, say aye.
Aye.
I'll vote aye as well. Is there anyone that is opposed to this motion? All right, seeing none, that budget is now adopted. We need a second motion to set the hearing date for the budget. Which date, Nick?
That would be for June 23rd at noon at Draper City Hall.
All right, would someone make that motion?
I'll make that motion to set our budget hearing for June 23rd at noon at Draper City Hall.
Motion by
I
Tammy.
second
it.
Second by Tammy? No?
I think it was
Mickey.
Council.
Okay. All right.
Multiple.
Multiple
Yeah.
seconds. So we have a motion and a second to set the budget date. Any further discussion? All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
I'll vote aye as well. Are there any opposed? All right, budget date set. Let's move on to the next item.
Great. Just really quickly, thank you all very much. This has been a big effort on the administrative side of things to get this budget ready for you. If there are any, we can make changes to this budget between now and June. So if there is any feedback that the board needs to bring to us, let us know. If there are any changes to the technical assistance, we will make those adjustments as well. So thank you very much.
All right, Cam, that takes us to you and the executive director's report.
Perfect. Normally this is at the end, but we moved it ahead of advocacy and engagement because we're going to pick up where we left off in April in our strategic discussions. Before we get to that piece, I just want to thank Nick and the operations team for all the great work over the last little while preparing the budget and getting it ready to go for next year. And thank you to all of you for your support of the organization in endorsing the tentative budget. So a couple things before we get to the strategic session, which will be the bulk of the rest of the agenda. One, I wanted to just give a federal update. Mayor Walker and Carson Eilers, our policy director, will be in Washington, D.C. later this week with the National League of Cities. That's the annual fly-in for the league presidents. I appreciate Carson going in my place because the day of that event is my daughter's 5th birthday. So I will be here for her birthday while Carson and Mayor Walker are in DC meeting with staff from the White House and key members of Congress on really a variety of topics, but I expect a good focus will be on the tax bill and then how that relates to local governments. They'll also be talking about the transportation reauthorization and other things that are happening in DC that affect local governments. So thank you, Mayor Walker, for making time to go, and thank you to Carson. We'll report back on that in future meetings, but just wanted to make you aware. Speaking of National League of Cities, Mayor Shepherd, is there anything you want to report back to the board about dialogue happening there?
Not really. We're just moving forward with our America's Housing Comeback and having some good movement there, as well as our mayors and CEOs group, and just kind of focusing on housing.
Perfect. So that's where we're at on the federal side. On the municipal election update, if you're up for re-election this year, quick reminder that you need to file in early June. If you're not running for re-election, then you don't need to file. And if it's not your year, then enjoy the summer. But this is what we refer to internally as the mayoral election cycle. That's not every mayor. Mayor Nadolski would say, wait a minute, what about me? Because 2 years ago, you had 8 cities that elect their mayors then. Mayor Silvestrini was another one. Mayor Burton was another one. Mayor Mendenhall and Salt Lake. But the vast majority of the mayors are up this election cycle. We do plan, like we have done for the last few years, to honor retiring electeds. So once we see who is not running for re-election after that early June filing period, then we will start to build a list of those who are retiring. So please keep us posted about what you end up doing. And then also if you hear of folks that are not running for re-election, make sure we know so we recognize them. One thing I did not put on the agenda, but I just want to give a quick report on, is I had notified the board back in March that Salt Lake City Police Chief Brian Redd had asked me to serve on his transition team, and the officers had approved that. I've spent a significant amount of time this spring meeting with various stakeholders at his request. And then a week and a half ago, we had a 3+ hour debrief with the chief and the rest of the transition team. And it was a very informative and insightful process. And I think it will help us as a league as we navigate both public safety and homelessness specific policy questions that will arise at the Capitol. Councilmember Dugan, since you're here on behalf of Salt Lake, I just want to applaud the city for hiring Chief Redd. He's been terrific to work with. And there are a lot of legislators who are watching closely what is happening, and that'll impact everyone. In fact, I recommended to Chief Redd that after that 3+ hour transition team meeting that we schedule a meeting with House and Senate leadership for him to report back on what he's learned and what the city has learned, and then how the city is taking that feedback and implementing it, and then also how the city's public safety plan can be utilized as a partnership both with the state and with other local governments. So just as a heads up, and in fact, I saw Chief Redd at a festival this weekend. He was out and about meeting with the public, and his son was with him, and it was nice to chat with him in that setting as well. So that's the quick report there. Happy to chat offline if anybody wants to chat further about that. Okay, April strategic session. So when we met last month in St. George, we really talked about these 3 concepts: the building relationships between city and state leaders, building out a policy platform at the league above and beyond what we've historically done in the resolution process, and this tricky, sticky question about a political liability city in light of our unique legal structure in Utah. So we want to follow up on all 3 of those today to some degree. On the building relationships piece, we'll actually end with that one, and Molly and Cassidy will give an update on and get your feedback on the Faces and Places manual that Cassidy has put together that's in your board packet that we would like to share broadly at LPC and in upcoming Friday Facts. On the policy platform, Justin's going to lead a discussion there here in a moment. He's done a lot of research over the last few weeks, looking at other state leagues that have resolution processes like ours or policy platforms like we're considering, and wants some feedback from you about next steps there. And then on the political liability piece, 2 days after we got back from the spring conference in St. George, we were on an email thread that we have summarized for you in the board packet. And so we're going to use Slido to get your feedback on whether you think the fact pattern presented to you as a bad city, a political liability, neither, either, and then what do you think the next step should be there as well. So that's what we hope to accomplish here in the next 45 to 50 minutes in this strategic next steps. Justin, I'll turn it to you to start on the advocacy side, and then I'll come back when you get to the state housing plan.
All right. Good morning, everyone. Good to see everyone virtually. Oh, there we go. My camera froze there for a second. I don't know if you can hear me, but good morning. Good to see everyone. So yeah, a few things we want to go over. First, special session update. There's been nonstop rumors about when there's going to be a special session. what we do know is they're not going to be a special session this week. So we don't have anything specific. We need to talk about that one. I think at this point, the likely special session is in September, but never count the legislature out for deciding to hold a special session if something else should pop up. But it will be a regular interim week. There is nothing too big that we need to talk about before interims come up. The audit committee meets tomorrow, and there's nothing that cities are too concerned about with the audits. There are some things around various school districts, and then we'll have regular interim committee meetings on Wednesday. Those first committee meetings of the year, oftentimes they just spend a lot of time talking about what committee meetings do, or committees do, talking about some of the things that they're going to study this year, but we don't have anything as league staff that we are presenting this week, which is fairly unusual, but not unwelcome. So we will also have our LPC this Wednesday. We're doing an online only LPC during the middle of interim day. So we'll be able to give any updates we have there from the morning and any previews that we are anticipating from the afternoon. So that's what's coming up on that this week. I'm going to give Carson a couple of minutes here to talk about research plan for interim, and then we'll jump over the state housing plan. So Carson, kick over to you.
Thank you, Justin, and I'll be pretty brief here. In the packet on page, I'm not sure what page, on page 19, you'll find a quick memo on some of the interim research projects we are looking at. This is sort of the whole universe, not necessarily everything that we'll be able to get to, but this is sort of the current summer plan. You can just sort of look over some of the quick summaries on these. Basically, we have 11, I consider, major projects that we're working on right now, we're putting together right now. And these range from public revenue projects to some internal research to housing research. Really, we're just looking at anything that can either A, help us this coming legislative session to have a more informed conversation around legislation or municipal policy, or B, information that can help our members better make policy. So this is sort of what we're looking on. I'm not going to go into depth on any of these, but you can just kind of skim and see what we're looking at. If there's anything else that you think would be really critical for us to look at, this is not set in stone yet, so please feel free to reach out to me and we can add it to the list of tentative projects. If there's any questions, I'm happy to answer them, but I know we've got a lot to get to still in this meeting.
All right. So yeah, feel free to reach out to us if you have questions. Just a shout out to Carson. Carson does, as I'm sure everybody knows, phenomenal research. And this is a big list of things to tackle. And this is not even on top of whatever things show up from interim meetings, from other studies, from housing work groups, from all the things that come up. So just Carson does a phenomenal job with all this research. And yeah, let us know if you have any questions or feedback on what that looks like. Speaking of things that are going to eat up a lot of time and are already eating up a lot of time, we're going to talk about the state housing plan. Carson, I think you had the original memo on this one, but Cam, do you want to give a little overview?
Yep, I can. And then looking for some feedback here. If you go down to the memo first, all the moving pieces on housing. So Carson, thank you for putting this memo together. This just quickly shows where we're at. We're in phase 2. You have 5 work groups plus the land use task force. The work groups have been meeting weekly, and several league board members are involved in those work groups. In fact, Mayor Silvestrini and Councilor Dugan and I were on a call at 8 this morning in work group 2, which is that subsidized affordable housing and starter home piece. And there are other board members that are involved in these different work groups because we made sure to have somebody on all of them. Over the last few days, they have been taking all the different policy ideas, categorizing them into different buckets. That process is still underway. And then once they're in the buckets then we'll have the substantive discussion. I expect that of these groups, the third one, the market rate housing, what we refer to as work group 3, will be the most controversial one. And so, kudos to Mayor Palmer of Harriman. We asked him to be on that work group. Mayor Silvestrini is also on that work group, and it's been feisty already. And we also have Councilmember Winch on the Rural and Resort Housing Work Group. And so thank you to all of you for your participation herein. And I anticipate that once the buckets are finalized, we'll reach back out and probably get a couple more board members involved. But we've been waiting before we asked you for an hour weekly of your time. We wanted to wait to see what actually got prioritized and then figure out who the right people are. Likewise, our two new CHA reps, Councilmember Shelton from South Jordan and Mayor Packard from Springville, I anticipate we'll incorporate them into these work groups as well. The CHA will next meet on May 27th, and I'll come back to that here in a second. So the phase 2 timeline is in your memo. You can see that they have an aggressive time frame because they have to report to the legislature by the end of the year. And they are shooting for that October timeframe to have the CHA cast a vote on it. So that'll be after our conference. Our fall conference is October 1st and 2nd. So I'll be right in the middle as we're getting, well, not middle, be near the end of the process, but probably right at the apex of the process. So that is actually really good timing to really get broad feedback from the membership on it. And then they'll be shooting for that November political subdivisions interim committee for the draft plan. So that's where we're at on the housing plan side. Now there's been some comments that the governor made last week that I'm going to address here in a moment. And now we have details about the Commission on Housing Affordability that I'll address in a moment as well. But are there any questions about the housing plan process as is? Okay, not hearing any then. And let me talk through the other pieces in this space. We started our LPC advisory group on housing last week. We ask you today to take action to approve Carson's interim research plan, as well as to approve the advisory group as an official LPC advisory group. But the advisory group met last week. We had about 40 people there, and we got some really good Slido feedback from them about if there were changes to moderate income housing plans, what should those changes look like? We also asked a really important question, and Nick, you can stop sharing the screen now for a moment. We also asked Slido questions around positive tactics that make a real difference on affordability, and whether our folks were comfortable with the state implementing those effective tactics, land use tactics, or if the line in the sand was, yes, it's an effective tactic, but it still needs to be the local government that implements it. And I think unsurprisingly, we had very strong response that if it's an effective tactic, we want to do it and let us do it. We don't want the state to do it. And I've already relayed that feedback to Steve Waldrop. So the LPC advisory group is going to meet basically every other week, and we're going to use that as the clearinghouse for discussion to then inform our representatives on the different work groups for the principles that this board has established around affordability, ownership, sustainable infrastructure, and quality of life. Now, I mentioned that the Commission on Housing Affordability will be getting underway this month. They will meet next Tuesday for the first time of the interim. They have asked us as a league to give a 10-minute, or they gave us 10 minutes to provide a policy recommendation for what we think the most important policy lever is that we could pull. Our plan is to ask that question at LPC on Tuesday as an open-ended Slido question to gather feedback from the members. And right now, if I had to give that answer today, my answer would be we need to implement Wasatch Choice and look at the success we've had with station area plans and HTRZs to date. And if we implement Wasatch Choice in the spirit of partnership and not preemption, then that can make a difference. And part of that implementation of Wasatch Choice is the land use planning side. And part of that is also infrastructure money and ensuring that we're building the infrastructure where it needs to go to accommodate those housing units. So we'll ask that open-ended question via Slido on Wednesday, but just wanted to give you a heads up so you could be thinking through that between now and then. We expect the CHA will meet next week, and then we'll defer to the housing plan work groups through the summer, and then we'll meet again for a progress report late summer, and then we'll weigh in on what the housing plan work groups have recommended in the fall. Now, I should note that the housing plan has a steering committee, and Mayor Silvestrini represents the league on that steering committee. So all the different work groups are not the actual decision-making bodies. They will funnel the steering committee to the CHA to the legislature. Let me pause there before I talk about the governor to see if there are any questions about the CHA timing and process, how it fits in, and then our plan of attack for the request of what our policy recommendation will be next week. Okay, I'm not seeing any hands, Justin, so I'm almost done so we can pivot to policy platform. Okay, last week, for those of you who may have missed it, we put it in Friday Facts, but Governor Cox was at an event at Stanford University where he made some comments about he's ready to be the quote unquote bad guy because he's losing patience with cities when it comes to planning for housing. I had a reporter who called me about it. I had not seen his clip, and so I did not want to respond to something I hadn't seen or heard, but instead just focused my response on the fact that just last Thursday, Wasatch Front Regional Council reviewed 3 different station area plans, 2 of which are board member cities, West Jordan and Draper, and then the other is Taylorsville, that those 3 station area plans alone contemplate 15,000 new housing units near those transit stops. And I referenced it as an example of the collaboration between state and local governments. Well, the governor has invited several cities, primarily mayors and city managers, to the governor's mansion on May 29th. And he wants to talk housing with that group. And then he's asked Mayor Shepherd to coordinate I guess the best way to put it maybe is to complete the narrative. Is that a good way to put it, Mayor Shepherd, of what's going on at the city level? And so Mayor Shepherd and I chatted on Friday about what other mayors would make sense to join Mayor Shepherd in that completing the narrative piece. And then we have already been working on some key data points that we will try to have ready for that May 29th meeting around the station area plan progress report to date, entitled units and the data that we have, the cost of infrastructure, how many cities are in compliance with moderate income housing plan mandates to date, and then the data that we did a few years ago around inspection timing, where 98% of inspections were happening within the 3-day statutory window. So those are a few things we're working on to help, again, complete that narrative. But recognizing that there were some folks who were frustrated by the governor's comments last week, we just wanted to lay that plan out to this group today so that as Mayor Shepherd is working on his piece for the 29th, and we're working to help him and gather these data sets, if there are any other points of emphasis that anyone would like us to include.
Raising my hand to signal my absolute frustration with the governor's comments. If he wants to build partnerships, then maybe he should come and talk with us and dialogue with us and truly engage with the people here on this board. It's I find it frustrating that a governor who wants us all to follow the Dignity Index talks at us through the media rather than to us.
So I think we're going to have a chance to talk to him at this meeting that we're having. And I'm going to share with him interesting facts. In 2024, according to Kim Gardner, my city's population increased by almost 1,400 people. For a built-out city, that's pretty impressive, and it's more growth than South Jordan and West Jordan combined experienced in the same time period, which is also interesting. And it's a result of the housing that we've entitled and that has been built in our city. And so, you know, it's a counter to the narrative that cities aren't doing enough, or, you know, a lot of us are. And, you know, it's time for some recognition of that, rather than completely, you know, pounding on us all the time as a general rule. You know, I think cities are doing what they can to entitle housing, and we don't build it. So, you know, anyway, we'll see what happens, I guess.
Yeah, amen, Mayor Silvestrini. And I should point out that, you know, I reached out to the governor's team Thursday night and Friday with that same messaging. And then I mentioned the data on station area plans, and kudos to Wasatch Front Regional Council and Mountain Associations of Governments who are putting together those data sets to show how that collaborative approach is making a difference. And the data, you know, we've gathered the data before, we've shared the data before, and we have to keep telling that story while also acknowledging that there are some potential political liabilities out there. And we'll talk about a couple of those here in a second. So Councilmember Dugan, we'll take a couple more comments on this piece, and then we'll pivot just into policy platform first, and then we'll come back to political liability. Does that work?
All right, thanks. It's just pretty much echoing what Kate and Mayor Silvestrini said, because we've put a lot of things in place over the last couple of years, and it takes time for them to come to fruition. But we are seeing a lot of housing going on, and there is a lot of work going on, and we got to make sure that people realize that, hey, this doesn't happen overnight. In 1 year, you're going to get 10,000 units. So we're doing a lot of work, and I appreciate that, Mayor Silvestrini, to keep on pressing that issue, and Cam the same thing, pressing the issue of what we've done in the past couple of years, and hopefully we'll see some of this fruition. But it is going to still take a lot of capital and help with the developers to institute a lot of the affordable housing side. So thank you.
And that'll be the crux of my message with the governor on the 29th, is what we've been doing and what we've accomplished, and that we're not sitting on our hands, and we're not fighting it. We're trying to find ways to make this work. And so that'll be the gist of the message.
Thanks.
Perfect. Okay, we have LPC in a couple of days, and we'll be using LPC to gather feedback on that CHA question. I guess I should also note on that CHA question that I will also incorporate into that messaging the list of things that we are currently working on that take time, and stationary plans, I think, is a perfect example. That bill passed over 3 years ago and is bearing fruit now. So if you would have asked us 2 months after that legislative session, will this make a difference? I think our answer would have been a hopeful and cautious optimism. Whereas now, 3 years later, we can say, yes, it's making the difference because of the collaborative work of WFRC, MAG, the cities, the state and private sector all working together. Okay, with that being said, if you have other thoughts, let us know in the housing space. We'll come back to the political liability piece because we know that could take up the whole time. And Justin has some time-sensitive feedback he wants on the next steps for a policy platform. So Justin, take it away.
Okay, now I know everybody wants to talk about political liability, but based on our board retreats down at St. George, everyone is way more excited about that topic than the policy platform. But we need to create a policy platform. So I'm going to ask for your feedback and attention for at least 7 minutes on this topic, maybe more. So if you remember, we've talked multiple times about moving away from doing 1 or 2 resolutions every year at our annual conference and moving more towards a policy platform where we lay out where we are on different policy topics. Some of the feedback we received in St. George was that it sounded like everyone was more interested in some broad statements instead of some very specific statements on things. One of the things that also differentiates us from many states is that there's not really other states that meet on a weekly basis with the Legislative Policy Committee the same way we do here. So it's not as if we need direction in a policy platform and forever hold your peace because we're never going to talk to you again. We talk to you all the time as a board, as an LPC. We have a lot of discussions here. So we don't have just a policy platform that we need to rely on. But what I've been doing this last month is I've been going through, here's my pages. I've been going through policy platforms from other states, and yes, I printed them out, and yes, I took notes in pen because my eyes are getting older, and that felt better. My eye doctor told me last year that I'm getting readers soon, so just get used to that coming up soon. And yes, I'm old enough for it. But here's a few examples. I think I'm able to share my screen. I'm going to show a few examples from a few different states, what they have for policy platforms, and then I'd like to get your thoughts and some feedbacks about directions as we start putting this together. So I think I can share my screen. Perfect. Yes, I can. All right, first one I'm going to show you. Can everybody see that? It's got not our capital, but the Arkansas capital on it. This is an example of what I do not think we want to do. What Arkansas has is a very dense sort of wall of text. It doesn't tell us anything about what they necessarily support or oppose unless you really dig into there. And it's big wall of text. And to me, this is maybe worst of both worlds because they have a policy platform and then they have individual resolutions that they adopt each year. And I don't think that's the direction that we likely want to go. So I'm showing this as an example of what I don't want to do. But if anyone really is excited about this one, please let me know. And just as in the follow-up board email, I will send these out so you can maybe look at them in some more depth. This is an example. This one's coming out of Michigan. Theirs is only 4 pages, which is kind of interesting. But what they've got is, for example, infrastructure, and then they have a recommended action. The recommended action could be worthwhile so that if there's something specific that we want to do in a given year, instead of having a resolution, we could update the policy platform with a recommended action. So that's why I'm showing you Michigan's. I like that piece of it. And anybody, if you have questions or comments as we're going along, you don't have to wait for me to get through all of these, but I do have 3 more states I'm going to show you. Looking at Kansas, Kansas has a fairly good format. They've got, for example, taxation and finance as one big policy heading, and then basically one paragraph, 5 or 6 lines on different policy topics that lay out their thoughts on those. I'm going to differentiate that one from Colorado, who also has kind of short statements, but what they say in every case is the league supports certain things or the league opposes certain things, making it clear where our lines are on separate things. So looking at all these different things, I think, again, the things I like having some recommended actions. That's something that we could update every year or in a given year if there's something specific we want to do with that year. I like the idea of having these sections and then some quick statements. And from Colorado here, I do like their support or oppose on various topics so that people would know exactly where the league stands. So with that, with goals that I would like these to be easy to follow, I'd like there to be clear statements. I'd like there to be long-term content that we can update when it needs to be, but also some short-term responsiveness for things we know that are coming up in sessions. So looking at those different states, we just love your feedback and thoughts about, what format-wise you would like to see out of this, and if there's things here that you either liked or didn't like, and just some feedback about how we proceed on this one.
Justin, I just sent you an example from the Utah Business Coalition.
Nice. Got it.
They are in more of the camp of kind of simple policy statements and not as much detail. There are some groups, you and I are both aware of them, but for everyone else, like the Utah Farm Bureau and the National Bureau, who have an incredibly detailed policy guide that just basically tells them where they're going to be, and it doesn't allow for much nuance for things as they come up in a legislative session. So my guidance would be, I think, something simpler and high level helps the staff when you can knock out bills, kind of like black and white sifting, like doesn't fit, does fit, does fit, kind of things. Because there's going to be bills that just fall in that gray area. no matter what, and not tying your hands there. So that we can have those more difficult policy discussions on those more nuanced bills as they come up. But thinking of them as kind of more than pirate code, so more than just
it's not just guidelines.
not just guidelines, but not also carved into stone in a way that hamstrings our ability to do our important work.
Sure. Okay, anybody else? I'm gonna stop sharing so I can see faces. What are thoughts about, so I guess, Kate, a little bit to your point there, is there worth in saying things like we support this and we oppose this, or do we want our statements to be a little broader than that? Just general statements. And then we save support, oppose for specific bills.
I would go with the general statement, because if we support a bill, then there's always amendments to the bill, there's always write-ups, and then you end up with that point of what part did you actually support? Rev A or Rev C or Rev D or whatever Rev. So I think the general would be a better avenue.
Yeah.
And I see, Mayor Wright, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, I echo that. I think if you start saying we oppose this and right in the platform, you've basically locked in a position and you don't have the room to negotiate that you've got to have.
Okay, great. And Councilmember Egbert, I see your comment there too. As far as, sorry, any other comments on that one? Because that's very helpful feedback.
I thought I have is from time to time, there are bills and specific types of bills that come out that from our perspective are, we're opposed to this.
Right.
And I think if we can write it correctly, I think we would like that, so that there isn't a legislator on the Hill that says, man, I'm surprised you guys didn't like this bill, because it's a no-brainer. We don't want, preemption or whatever.
Right. And I think there are, we've got kind of our prism and our principles right now that we generally rely on that way. And I think, I would think you would put something on the first page of something like this that says, here's our, overarching principles, regardless of any subject matter, that would guide everything else within it. Okay, great. Councilmember Hinton, thank you. The final question I have, and this isn't one we necessarily have to decide today, and we're not even asking for action, but is something like this something that right now, I guess let me back up. Right now, resolutions are adopted by the full membership at our business meeting at the annual conference in Salt Lake. Is a policy platform something like this that we would, reauthorize every year? Do you think that's something we take to the whole membership for reauthorization? Or do we get feedback from everybody and then you as a board ultimately approve the policy platform? And I guess I'll throw out some pros and cons. One of the cons of resolutions right now is that we're doing this in September or October. And then we have November, December, and even early January when we're negotiating and figuring things out. And that resolution is already a little outdated. So is this something that we get feedback from the members? And I'm putting my thumb a little on the scale as I say that. And then come back to as a board as we get closer to session for approval, or is this something we want the whole membership to approve at our annual conference? Just would love some procedure thoughts there.
Justin, let me make one observation about resolutions. The policy sort of done on the fly over years. And usually it was associated with, we needed to find a mechanism to send a message to the legislature. The truth of the matter is over the last few years, we haven't used it because we deliberately made it difficult for a reason. And the policies that we've enunciated through bills, et cetera, I don't think resolutions are ever going to return to being used as the as a primary resolution process. Mayor Silvestrinian will remember the one where we thought we had a motherhood resolution on air quality that blew up on us on the floor of the conference. And I think we all learned a lesson. That's not a great way. We don't want to have the convention become that. And so I think we sort of shied away from that. So in some ways, the question is going to become, hopefully we've expressed our views on subjects long before we get to the process that we normally would use a resolution. On the other hand, you hate to take the tool away, but you hopefully make it such that it has to be really unique before you use it. So I just sort of say I hate to gauge anything by the past on resolutions, because I think we sort of fixed that issue. So, but the question is do we need to reinforce positions that have been taken in the past? I mean, for example, we've got multiple resolutions endorsing the 50-50 distribution formula. I don't think there's any doubt that's been the lead's position, but if somebody wanted to change it, they can bring some mechanism up for doing it. So I just throw it out that to a certain degree, there are issues that we felt strongly about that we've always said we're in favor of. If somebody wants to change that, I suppose we have to have a means for doing it, because we have taken positions on things in the past. But I just said the caution of, I hope we don't get into the route that we're going to use resolutions for much as far as articulating positions. Hopefully we've done work before then.
Right. So any other thoughts on, whether you as a board approve a policy platform or we take the full membership for ultimate approval, although we would obviously get feedback from everybody.
Here's my thoughts for you, Justin. Since we'd be undertaking this for the first time, I think in taking it for the first time, we'd want the membership to be presented it and to vote to approve. But going forward, after we've adopted the initial policy platform, perhaps one of the things we do is set up a review cadence, whether that's annually or every other year or every 3 years. I don't know what the cadence would be, but we set up an annual cadence and we set up a process if you would like to submit a change to an item or an addition of a new item because a new significant policy thing has come up. So we create a pathway. Maybe it's not via resolution, maybe it's a submission to the board in the going forward sense, so that the board can discuss. And maybe there's something where it goes to the full membership every third year. In the intervening years, it's up to the board to verify and adopt, so that we can add something if something's come up between sessions. And the other thing I'd say is we should be going through the resolutions we do have, and they should be candidates for some of these broad statements. I found another example to share from the Taxpayers Association that's not very long, but probably, they can easily point to some of those things and say, sorry, representative, we are opposed to your bill because it does not increase the public's awareness, participation, and understanding of taxation by closing meetings, bill to close meetings on this. So, but it's not that. It's one page. I think ours could be a little more robust. We have so many more things than they do.
We do have a lot of things. And I'll say, I can, again, share examples, but Colorado's, for example, it's pretty big text. It's not, packed in there, and they're actually policy platforms about 10 pages, which doesn't seem insane to me. All right. Well, thanks for everybody's feedback on this one. We'll keep coming back with next month. We'll come back with maybe some more solid proposals about what this looks like. But appreciate everybody's feedbacks, and we can talk about more exciting things like political liability. So Cam, I think with that, kick it back over to you.
Yeah, it wasn't unmuting. Okay. Thank you, Justin.
I was about to walk down the hall and make sure you're still there, but
no, it just wasn't a meeting. Thank you, Justin, for that. And I do think that question that Justin asked at the end of who actually ratifies is an important one for us to figure out in the next few weeks, because when we've talked to other state leagues, several state leagues that have done a resolution process like ours in the past have pivoted away from the full membership ratifying to the board ratifying. And as Justin said, there are pros and cons to it, but that's why we want to consider that. And I think it would elevate your role as the board, but we want to do it in a way that's still inclusive to the membership. Okay, I'm going to turn it to Jared here to walk through fact pattern number 1. And this is something we received right after midyear. And we're going to actually ask you several Slido questions since we don't have the luxury of being able to break it into small groups like we did before. So this is fact pattern number 1, and Jared will walk through this one, and then I'll come back and do fact pattern number 2. Jared, take it away.
Okay, so hopefully you've all been able to read this. Just as the high points, the email that we received basically was saying there was a city that was requiring more than 32 feet of road width and was using the exception that currently is in the law to accommodate street parking. During the time, and I wasn't there, but in 2023, there was a lot of negotiation amongst many different parties, and you all probably remember this negotiation. So we've got a few with that set up as far as, for that city. Would that city be a bad city, a political liability, both, neither? So we've got some Slido questions that we wanted to get your feedback on. Again, this is just a continued discussion of the previous conversation we had as it relates to political liabilities. But with that, do you consider cities who are using the 32-foot road width street parking exception to be bad cities, political liabilities, both, or neither?
And then Jared, there's a question from Kate about the fact pattern and verifying. And so there were multiple cities listed in that email thread, and we have verified almost all of them. So the trust but verify piece is critical, and we verified almost all of them at this point. And the one that we haven't verified, just haven't really connect with someone at the city yet. So that's the answer there. Are there thoughts or questions that everybody wants to kind of ask aloud before you do the Slido question, or thoughts, anything else here? So as Jared indicated, this would be the first of several questions, ways we work through this.
Cam?
Councilmember Morris.
Quick question. Is this their default position, or this was a one-off for a special or a different development? Do you know?
Jared?
Sorry, I was going to respond to Kate. Can you repeat that again?
It's okay.
Yeah.
I'll answer. Yes, in at least 2 of the cities, the engineer was recommending that the cross section for the residential road, basically citywide, use this exception for street parking and then requiring the wider road. So it was not just one neighborhood, they were using that exception to set the policy. Whereas when we negotiated this concept, the idea was you'll have certain areas where you're planning for street parking in lieu of other types of parking. And so you need that flexibility on a project by project basis. Does that help, Councilmember?
Yes, thanks.
And just to be clear, can everyone see the QR code and does everyone have access to the Slido questions?
Jared, I dropped a link to the Slido in the Zoom chat as well.
Okay, thank you.
Until just a minute ago, I was just seeing the agenda on the screen share.
Oh, okay.
Nick, is there still a screen being shared maybe?
Yeah, it's got the Slido on the screen share from my end.
Okay.
Yes, everyone should be able to see it now. I've ended my share.
Feel like I need to qualify my answer, which I won't do here, but like I want a text box that I can give you a little bit of explanation as to my answer. Dang it.
Well, you can just do it right now.
Well, I don't want to infect the discussion. I don't want people to answer.
Infect. The future questions may help, may give you some leeway to further explain. So if not, then at the end we can really the purpose and point behind this is to help us know as league staff how to proceed forward when there are cities that are either quote unquote bad cities or political liabilities or both, particularly in the situation where there's legislation that happens. And at that point, okay, now where do we go? So I think that's just for your understanding, that's the purpose behind that.
All right, let's go on to the next question.
So this is prioritizing what we should do as the league to engage with cities who are using the 32-foot road widths parking exception. And Carson, this is the one where they have options, right? Okay.
Correct. Yeah. So there's 4 options here. I'm not actually sure why it's not showing them, but the 4 options are: 1, work with cities to reduce political liability; 2, narrow legislation targeting these cities to reduce the impact on other cities; 3, fight legislation on principle; and 4, let those cities fight their own fight.
Oh, I am going to say it. With this, there feels like the assumption that, well, I'm going to assume that in the circumstance that we're talking about, the city has said we're going to do this for everything, and if that's the case, that's kind of the mindset that I think I'm. But I don't
Yes,
want.
they have.
I don't want to assume that for every circumstance. Like I think there is a value for the exception. And so if somebody's saying, we're just going to do this for every street because the exception exists, then, X, Y, or Z is my thought. But in these answers, I might add a 5th choice, which is require the city to have some findings in their decision to use that exception, right? And so that might be narrow the legislation, but I think the exceptions can and should exist, but they're exceptions, obviously not the rule. And if I'm using it as the rule, then I've broken the exception rule. Am I making sense, Jared?
You are. And let me just say this, that the examples that we have used the exception to,
It's the rule.
oh, no, have used that exception. And from a legal standpoint, there is leeway to say, in fact, the exact language is as needed to accommodate street parking. So that is the exact exception. And so there, I guess, yes, this is, all of them are using this exception as the basis behind why they're requiring more than 32 feet of road width.
And Seth and everyone else, we will have an open-ended question at the end of the exercise for, this exact sort of nuance, because, Kate said it as well about the trust but verify piece. There's always more to the story. And every time Jared and I follow up, or Todd or Justin or whoever else, there's always more to the story.
Okay, why don't we go on to the next?
Perfect. So this is now a separate fact pattern. This has come out of a city. This is in reference to one particular city. There are a handful of others, but one particular city along the Wasatch Front. I was talking to a city council member, and we have verified this, and it's been, state leaders have pointed to this city as well, where they're not allowing housing in the city anywhere except for lots of a quarter acre or larger. So they don't allow multifamily, they don't allow townhomes. It's single family on lots of a quarter acre or larger. So this is a very, very small number of cities in this state. But there is, at least one in the Wasatch Front that is in this space. And I expect this city will come up, maybe not by name, but will come up at the governor's mansion next week. So how would you view this city in light of how your communities are planning, and from a league perspective? Would you view them as a quote unquote bad city or a quote unquote political liability, both or not? Then after this question wraps, we'll ask a similarly framed question that we just had. And I should note that the framing that we used for that previous question and the next one are both very similar. Very similar to what we asked the city attorneys when we met with them a couple of weeks ago, because we're curious here with this group compared to the attorneys of how the answers compare. So Carson, let's leave this up for 10 more seconds, and then we will move on to the next question. I want to make sure to give all the board members a chance to weigh in. Okay, Carson,
All right,
go ahead.
that's been.
Yep, perfect. So same thing. For that particular city that I'm referencing, prioritize the actions of what ULCT should do. And then the last question will be just an open-ended question of
basically going back to what it means to work with as one of those priorities, and to spur your thought process. I'll give you a few examples.
So Carson, let's give them about 30 more seconds to prioritize, and then we'll have that open-ended question that Jared can walk folks through, and then that'll wrap this section for today. Okay. Carson, go ahead and move to the next one.
Okay, so one of the answers to the priorities was that the league should work with cities to reduce the political liability. So this is getting to a more specific question, and we had another question that said, what do you not want the league to do to work with the cities? And so we want to get an idea of what that looks like to you. Just for ideas, and we don't really want to plant we just wanted to know but to just spur the thought process, does that mean forwarding the email? Does that mean calling the mayor and city manager to explain the politics behind the with the 32-foot road width, what that means politically? Use them by name in different meetings and say, this is what this city has done, and Cameron City has done this, and what do you want to do? And so specifically call them out. Maybe it's putting pressure on the city by select other cities to go and speak to them, and that's the league's involvement. Maybe it's either Roger or I sending a memo to the legal team saying, this is not how we interpret the law, and this is not what it was meant and intended to be. So, or the league presenting at city council meeting saying, this is, there's a host of things that what work with mean. But we just wanted to give you an ideas, and hopefully not the only thought process and ideas that you have as far as what it means to work with or not work with.
Perfect. Thank you, Jared. These questions are going to be helpful as we're navigating the housing plan discussions, because I think the biggest threshold question at the housing plan will come down to, does the state trust local governments, or does the state feel like they can't trust local governments? And one anecdote can often drive a narrative. And so we always try to counter those anecdotes. And then we also want to help remove those anecdotes and address those anecdotes as much as possible. So we appreciate the thoughtful feedback, both aloud and in text here. And the other key component to this is really being able to tell our story of the great things cities are doing. That's what we're going to get to here in just a sec. The last, Mayor Walker, we do request that the board approve the LPC advisory group plan as we laid it out earlier, and approve the research plan thus far, and then we can move on to the engagement section for our final agenda item.
Is there a motion to that effect? Anyone? Motion to approve the policy plan?
Sorry, what are we approving exactly? I'm happy to make the motion. I'm just not sure what I'm motioning.
To approve the LPC advisory group and the plan that we laid out on how we're engaging with the state housing plan through the advisory group.
Okay, I make a motion to approve that plan.
Motion by Kate, second.
Second.
All right, we got multiple seconds. Any further discussion? All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
All vote aye as well. Any opposed? All right, go ahead. Next item.
Perfect. Molly, I'll turn it back to you, and And Molly, I'll let you just wrap up I'll let you do the engagement report and then wrap up the meeting with Mayor Walker. So my last comment to everyone is just thanks again for your time today, and thanks for the support and for the dedication to local governments. And we'll see you in person in Draper. Molly, take it away.
Thank you. So as Cam mentioned in his executive director report, one of our big conversations was around building relationships with legislators and what the league could do to help. And those conversations were great. It ended up, I would say, with a mix of you expressing areas at times where you needed help, as well as sharing a great variety of things that you have done in your communities that you found success with. We also had a great point that came in talking about with Mayor Shepherd, that really a lot of it is too late. And when we talk about building relationships with legislators strictly in a policy standpoint, we tend to do it too close to session because it's tied directly to legislation, and that we really need to be building these relationships and getting to know legislators as people who know your community. We have the best luck of doing that and the best outcomes when it can be people getting to know people and people getting to know your community, not necessarily under the veil of a specific piece of like policy that threatens your community, but trying to be as proactive as possible to build those relationships. So we compiled all of your feedback and built out a playbook. And Cassidy, I'll turn it over to you. Cassidy went ahead and created an awesome document online for Faces and Places that coincides with how you can connect with legislators face to face to familiarize them with the places you represent and what is going on there. This is a tool that we would like to share out with our broader league membership, but given that this was one of our directives from our last strategic session, wanted to bring it to you first for feedback. Cassidy, are you? I can't hear you. Okay, there we go. All right, excellent.
Okay, I should be good. It just took me a second. I was struggling with the mute button as well, Cam. Okay, so something that's really interesting about this Faces and Places playbook for legislators is we actually have it grounded in GIS framework. So as you scroll down, we obviously have some of like the key things of like, hey, this is what we hope you're doing. Here's some ideas and things like that. But we also have a lot of latitude to play with this format. So something I'd really like to do and focus on is like, how can we get our communities to work together when it comes to talking to legislators? So something I slipped into the end of mid-year conference survey was a question that says, does your municipality need help from the league to establish a relationship with your legislator? And what we found is 79% of our respondents, granted, they're probably like the cream of the crop, said no, they don't need help. 9% said yes, and 13% said I'm not sure. So really the goal with Faces and Places, specifically in reaching out with your legislators, is trying to get our members to advance what they're doing. And that's why this document covers some of the really basic things like tour and site visits, but it also talks about like, hey, you can work with other cities to talk to your legislators. The nice thing about this formatting is it's really easy to change. We can add video. Something I'd like to do eventually is kind of add a map that talks about here are your legislators, and these legislators also share these cities. So you know not only like, okay, I have this legislator, but these other cities also have this legislator, so you can leverage those relationships. So I guess my biggest question for the board is like, do you have anything that we feel like we're missing in terms of content or format, or any other comments on where you'd like this document to go?
I might need just a bit of time to absorb it and think about it before I have firm thoughts. I don't know if others.
Yeah. Cassidy, could we put the link for this in the chat so folks can look at it? Another piece that came up in those conversations we were having that Mayor Nadolski brought up and others echoed was we've noticed we have a lot of kind of frustration internally with legislators bringing bills that feel like solutions to kind of one of problems, or maybe even problem is too strong of a word, right? Like a one of anecdote. And I think one thing that this document also tries to arrive at, that Mayor Nadolski brought up in our group, was that legislators really only have one tool. It's a bill. And so as local municipal officials, we have way more tools in our tool belt to address problems. And if we can work proactively with them, we can work to solve those problems with a tool that isn't a bill, but legislators don't really have access to those tools. And so it behooves us to kind of give access to those tools as much as possible to prevent the creation of a bill that may not be needed. I know that we're getting kind of closing in on 11:30. I want to move on. You have that link. If you have feedback for other things you'd like to see considered or anything else, if you would just email Cassidy and I, that would be really helpful. And with that, we have two more things we want to cover with engagement really quickly. Councilmember Egbert, I see your comment. We would like to share this as a toolkit with our members. We have not done so yet. This was something that came out of the April strategic session with the board, and so we wanted to present it with the board as a follow-up before we broadcasted it anywhere, to make sure that it kind of caught the collective vision between staff and board members.
Let me clarify. What I meant is, like, literally when it's finalized, are we giving a presentation as opposed to just emailing it and expecting somebody to read it?
I mean, we haven't made it that far yet. We want to make sure this is the document that you want to share. And then once we know what that is, we are going to work on how we can disseminate it out. And we are very open to a variety of methods to do so. Okay, excellent. So with that, I want to turn the time over in a moment to McKenna. I know that several of you have received emails from us about ARPA. We've discussed this in the past, but we are working on our ARPA reporting, and McKenna has been a huge linchpin within the state to make sure that those federal dollars that are coming into the state are staying in the state. And so I just wanted to turn the time over to her. And I think this is a great case study of the importance of the league in those pieces of technical assistance in the LAA program. So McKenna, if you're ready, I'll hand it over to you.
Yeah, you bet. Thank you so much. And let me go ahead and I'll share the beautiful slide that Cassidy was able to make for us. Let's see. So first off, I just want to highlight, so many of you were instrumental and really helpful in making sure to reach out to the communities that you have access to, and to get them to do their ARPA reporting. And so by the April 30th, there were two deadlines. There was a first push that we were working with. And so in that first push, what we were really trying to do was capture 5.6 million of ARPA funds that were at risk for recoupment. At the end of the day, with that giant push that our LAAs did with all LAA qualifying communities, there was only one community that did not submit a report with an outstanding amount of $13,000, and they intend to return that money to Treasury. They didn't feel comfortable in spending it. So out of that giant 5 million number, we were able to essentially save the majority of it, aside from this 13K, for our rural communities, which is massive. Now, what our LAs are working on is another ARPA push to get all the municipalities that did not submit their 2025 reports compliant. And so this includes big communities that are along the Wasatch Front, as well as a lot of our small municipalities throughout Utah. And so originally, after that April 30th deadline, there were 68 municipalities with 36 million of funds outstanding. And now so they worked on it for about 10 days. And as of our last report from the National League of Cities, there was only 25 municipalities and 7 million outstanding. So our LAAs are continuing to work on this, continuing to try to get everybody in Utah compliant. I also want to highlight that the National League of Cities has been sharing with others that Utah's really on top of their game. We've been fantastic to work with and have a really great system going. And that's all to do with our LAAs, the placement of them throughout the state. And we're really grateful for all of their efforts as we've strived to get everybody compliant with ARPA. So thank you.
Thank you, McKenna. And I see we're right at 11:30. So to wrap up with conflict competence, we had another meeting with Danya and her team following the needs assessment, and we've laid out our strategy for this next year, which was also detailed a bit in the budget document if you were able to review that. But what we're looking at is a series of training opportunities, both more in-depth and more, I would say, easy to access. So what we're looking at right now is a pretty full day supplemental training on the Friday after annual. That will be a multi-hour in-depth in-person opportunity for anyone who would like to extend their stay. After that, we will be looking at incorporating conflict competence into the elected official training. So having a 2 to 3 hour training on that as a part of our newly elected official training, so we can get folks that information and that skill set right as they're coming into office. We will also likely be doing something along those lines with our mid-year conference, and then work to incorporate it into our regional events next spring that we are planning on doing with the municipal election year to catch those folks again. After that, we're looking at what we can do with webinars to supplement that and bring things back in. And then once we've done a full year of that, if it's something we want to move forward with, looking at transitioning annual into being a bit more of a 201 option for folks, with the spring training opportunities with mid-year and regional events and newly elected to be the introductory pieces. So with that, I'll wrap up that with my feedback for engagement. I think in an ideal world, well, I won't say that. We're going to have the ideal world. We are hoping to present the faces and places at first to LPC on Wednesday. So if you can have your feedback to Cassidy and I by COB tomorrow, Tuesday, we will incorporate what we can into the document, and then we will plan on presenting that to our Legislative Policy Committee on Wednesday, and then we will look at considering how we can further develop and roll that out from there. That's all I got. Thank you.
Thank you, Molly. I don't think there's anything else. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
All right, second.
Mickey.
Second.
All in favor of adjourn, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Doesn't matter. We are adjourned. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.